Ruth Bergeron is a talented business professional with over 20 years of experience. The Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania native began her career with Macy's, eventually advancing to senior-level multi-unit regional executive director of human resources. Ruth's 17-year corporate career with Macy's ended when she became the full-time caregiver for her late mother. Her mother's end-of-life process and ultimately death led Ruth to her second career with Service Corporation International, aka Dignity Memorial, the largest death care provider in North America. In 2015, she was named one of only 29 distinguished employees inducted into the Dignity Honors Circle of Excellence, and she is also an Insight Certified Funeral Celebrant. Ruth now has her own company, Laid to Rest Services, LLC. Her mission is to encourage more planning and conservation around the topic we all have in common, death. She is also an author, and her book is House of Plenty. It's dedicated to her mother and all women to be the best in your spiritual, physical, emotional, and confident lives by defining and understanding the plenty you already possess. Please welcome Miss Ruth Bergeron.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. Anybody know the little story behind, the ruby slippers? Right? Ruby slippers. What happened at the end of the day? She went all over the place, right, Dorothy? And what was all she needed? Home. It was her. It was right in between her little red shoes. She clicked and it was her. So when I realized that it kind of all starts with you, you can start doing a lot more than you think you can do. And that's really where the House of Plenty kind of came. It's like women, we have a plenty within us, and men as well. And for men, it's really appropriate, the book too, because I grew up with all boys. I grew up with 5 brothers. I was the only girl. I'm the youngest of those guys. And it was very interesting of how they viewed women as well, and their relationship even with my mom. My mom would tell me all the time, I never worry about you, take care of your brothers. And I used to resent it because I'm like, why aren't they taking care of me? They're older, I'm the youngest. She said she never, ever, ever had worried about me at all, but always worried about them and asked me to please make a pact to take care of those guys. So it was very interesting, and it's like I'm the oldest and they're younger, and that's how our family dynamic is. And we're all very, very close in that way. So when I look at that, I brought also my brother's license plate. So when we talk about who we are, we talk about Pegeron, so that's our family. But for him, this name means so much more. And that's for everybody. It's those ruby slippers, and then who are you? Who are you? Who do you want to represent? What is your brand? I think she said it so eloquently and so perfectly. The brand is who do you want to be? Who do you want to, it doesn't matter. You create that. And you create it through life by how other people impact you. We heard also where she said she want to do things she loves. We know what we love to do and we know what we hate to do, right? My first career was with Macy's, as she said. I spent 17 years with them, traveled from up and down the East Coast, from New York down to Puerto Rico, opening stores, closing stores, Florida, Burndines, Riches, Lazarus, Goldsmiths. I could go in any store, any day, any time, right now, to this minute, tell you exactly how profitable it is, why it's profitable. I ate it, I breathe it. I'm all about women. When you work in that environment, you wake up at 3 a.m. and you're thinking about what does she want. When you go to bed at night, you're thinking about what does she want. What does she want for her husband? What does she want for her child? What does she want for herself? I have dissected how to sell lipstick every single way and how to sell a women's dress to a kid's dress. You name it, have done it when it comes to that arena. And I've learned, first and foremost, she rules everything. Everything. Not in a negative way. Right, she does. Not in a negative way at all, a very positive way. So we have to realize that as individuals, and I had to realize it as an individual. And I did that through what I did kind of, I think someone said it, I think she said it earlier about every step of the way you meet different people in different ways, and they impact you in so many different ways, and you're building your brand and you don't even know it. You're building your brand and you don't even know it. I was at a church with a pastor. He sent me to a class on grief. Go, take that class, come back to the church and report, see if we need it. I'm like, why me? Like 25, 28 years old or something. It was weird. I'm like, why me? Oh, death? Who? What? No, I like fashion and this and that. I'm running around doing all this fun stuff. I'm like, he just wants me to go do that and report back. Well, when I reported back, he said, okay, now write it and do it. And we're going to have a team. I'm like, oh my gosh. So then when my mother gets sick, I leave my career. And you got to be willing to let things go and move on. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. But I tell you what, it's the most rewarding because sometimes you grow that way. So I left a 17-year career when she went from critically ill to terminally ill. I'm the only girl, as I said, so I was the chosen one to take care of her. Her desires was always to stay home and it didn't want to move. So I packed myself up, left my house, packed on up and went to her little apartment and piled into that little room, and me and her had a great time as she died. So for a year of her life, we just did a lot of fun things. We knew it was ending, and during that process, I thought, wow, that's why I was sent to that grief class, because I needed to know how to deal with this, because I didn't know. Well, lo and behold, while I was doing that process with her, I was meeting all these people saying, can you come talk to families? Because they're having a hard time with this death thing, and you guys are cool. We were going to casinos. You didn't even know my mom had a death announcement over her life. You had no clue. We were dressing up, still doing things as normal. You just don't know. She was still able to get out, and we did it. So I started going to talk to families and saying, hey, this is what it's all about. And they asked me to do that. So after her death, I come back home, house is empty. I'm like, what do I do? My boss flies me to Texas and says, okay, we're going to set you up here. Instead of Macy's, though, we want you to open about 45 Burlington stores. We want you to work from down in Galveston, Texas, all the way up to Houston. Your new transportation is, yes, an airplane, because in Texas it's so big. You got to go from one side to the other. And when I was there, I was like, okay, he said, we'll give you, $128,000. Here's your car. You'll have your temporary housing. You know the drill. Those of you in corporate America, you know the drill. The drill's the same. It's 6 figures a car. We'll give you a housing, whatever you need. We'll help you buy a house. The story's the same because they know they need to make it as comfortable for you as possible because it's a lot of work. But while I was there, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. This is not where I want to be. I walked into about 6 of the Burlington stores. I went to sites where they wanted me to build stores. I knew why they wanted me to do it. I built a Puerto Rico store. It was very successful. Did $80 million right off the bat. I just have a gift of doing that. And business is my thing. So I knew why I was there in that thing. But when I was going back home, I looked at him. I said, I could do it for you for a year. Can you commit to me a year that I'll stay in Texas and then I can go? He said, no. He said, it's going to be about a 5-year project. You can't. I can't do this. I can't commit. Now, at Macy's, they used to do that for us all the time. You say, I want to go to Puerto Rico for 1 year. They say, okay. And then if you want to extend. Well, this guy, and I worked for him, and he said, no. He said, no, Ruth, can't do it this time. You got to commit 5 years. So I said, well, thank you. I didn't have a job. I didn't know how I was going to pay, but I figured for the whole year, my mortgage was paid, and I didn't have a job. I don't know how it happened other than the grace of God. Figured a couple more months, I'm going to try it. So I turned down the offer, got on that airplane, came home, and I went to an event similar to this, started talking to a gentleman about death, which I love is death. I've learned I just love it. I love talking about it and helping people plan for it. It's the only common thing we have, and we could do it well. So I just was talking to this gentleman about it, and then he got excited too. And I was like, oh, first time ever somebody got excited about this career. And I went to school, I went to Nova, I took every class they had. I looked in their book, it said death and dying, death and religion, how people are impacted by death. And I signed up for them all. Gave them $2,000, and I just sat in class, and then I wanted more death. I'm like, wow, I may be on to something. So that man that sent me to that grief class, he started something in me that I don't know how this is all happening. Even when my mom died, I denied hospice, and it was just she and I. She took her little last breath, and it was just she and I. It was like, cool. It's like, okay, I can do this. So this gentleman said, well, I said, I just can't figure out a career. He's like, well, I happen to have just retired after 50 years or 40 years from the largest death care provider. Come on, let me get you connected. And then from there, it was just like, wow, and I just felt so comfortable in that environment and helping people. But an epiphany came, and that was why when I came back, I said, I thought my family was doing something normal that every family did. My family always pre-planned. My mom was pre-planned, my grandfather was pre-planned, everybody knew what they had, where they were going to be buried. You really literally had to just, when the death happened, you plugged in a script and it played out. There was nothing more to it. There was nothing about, we never had issues with who's going to pay for this and who's going to pay for that, and is there insurance, is there not. We didn't have those issues, so I'm thinking, we're abnormal. I'm just a little project chick, I'm like, we're just a little country project type people. We not know nobody great. So, but when I got into this environment, I'm like, wow. I'm sitting in front of professionals, educators, even physicians that did not understand the end of life and what happens. And it's not any one community, it's everybody. And I've served now, I've done over 500 funerals and burials. I've worked well with the Muslim community, the Jewish community, Africans, and everybody's rituals. And, it's just really cool. I love it all. Asian, the Asian community. One little girl one time, she came back like 3 days later, and she said, I forgot to give my dad the instructions to his iPhone. And I'm like, I don't know what this means. So I went and got Jerry. He was a gentleman I worked for. He was Chinese. I said, Chinese? I said, Jerry, I just buried a Chinese family. She coming back with these directions. What do I do? Well, in that culture, you got to take things with you because you still live in that culture. So she was upset. She forgot to put the iPhone. He got a new iPhone before he passed. She forgot to give him the instructions, though, in his vault, because that way he can have it when he needed it. So I'm like, okay, now this is new for me. That one was a little bit strange. I said, okay, I gotta figure this out. So I went and got some resources, figured it out. But Jerry said, Ruth, I got an answer for you. I said, what? He said, tell her she won't need it, and here's why. And I'm listening to him because they're of the same culture. He said, tell her Steve Jobs already died. He's already where he is. He can go meet him. I went and told the young lady that, and she was like, you're right. Forgot about that. She was the happiest little 12-year-old I ever met. I was like, yes, yes. And when you get in the car and you feel those yeses of just serving someone to that level, you know you're in the right thing. So that's what I do. I just want to help every single person. Now, my new career, so I've been branding and building. And one of the things I've done is, in my time of building, so what do I need to do in this? So I went to school. Then I went and got something called a celebrant, so I can do eulogies and funerals for people. I write stories very well, I've been told. So I write a person's story for them. I love doing it when they're alive, but on the worst day of their family's life, I have a gift that I can sit and talk to the three key family members and write a 10-minute speech about this person, and I love doing it. I've had the honor, my friend Renee is now my friend. I had the honor to serve her when her mom passed, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful connection there. So you meet people along the way. And then I said, well, I should help them. We always talk about living well and eating well and all of that. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. You can eat as much spinach as you want, but you gotta go. You gotta go. Sorry. Yeah, you do. I do not want to be the bearer of bad news, but do all of that. But you do have to take this journey. And I want to help with that. So, and it doesn't have to be tomorrow, but it can be whenever. My father just, it was so funny. My father, we were together at a family reunion on June 22nd and 26th, and July 4th, 5th, he died. Heart attack, gone. Boom. Just that quick. And it was like, wow. But he had just finished everything with me, finalized it again, and said, yeah, I think this, I think that, so that we could really mourn and grieve his death. Because we didn't have to worry about, and there's not 8 of us, we didn't have to worry about, well, did he want this? There's 2 things you always ask. Did he want that, or am I doing the right things? You alleviate that when you do it yourself. So in doing that, it's also a financial. So now I went and got my license for insurance and health, so I can help people with that as well. So that when that event occurs, insurance is to insure your life. That's a lot of the stress that goes through people's veins and their emotions that they can't grieve because they got a financial burden. Now they're grieving, and it's like, how do I help them? I want to help the whole picture. And everybody is not like our family. And now that I've sat in front of families and I realize that, I'm like, how can I help further? So it was connecting with a new career and saying, okay, it takes a while and you got to build up, because when you show up and you say, hey, I'm from late arrest, and then they say funeral planners, like, oh, nobody wants to talk about it. But guess what? I'm still smiling. I'm full of life. I want to talk about it because I want to help you. And I guarantee you, everybody here can raise their hand and say they probably have either heard of a situation or been impacted by a situation where the plans weren't made. Can you raise your hand and tell me, have you ever been impacted by a situation where the plans were not made? And who's been impacted where the plans were made? Big difference? Yeah, is it a big difference? It's a big difference. So I use my own model, the spiritual, physical, emotional, confident model, to help me build these kind of brands and do these kind of things to help motivate others to do what's right for them. And how do those things, so my book, and there's their raffle for my book. I want to give somebody my book. So my book talks about just women from a standpoint of how you have to do that. So, it talks about just who we are, in a sense that every single person, every single thing comes from the female. That's how God created us, right? So we're houses of plenty. How many people are mothers here? Stand up if you're a mother. All right, mother. Stand up, all right? Yeah. Stand up if you are a pet owner and you care for a pet. All right. Stand up if you're a grandmother. Stand up if you're a wife. All right. Stand up if you're employed. If you're employed, you got a boss. Stand up if you're a volunteer and somebody depends on you. Stand up if you're a business owner. Right, see? Look at that. That's the purpose. The thing is that you see women stand up multiple times for those things, so you are dependent upon a lot. Your wives, your mothers, your aunts, your sisters, your caretakers usually, your grandparents. Now a lot of grandparents are taking care of children more. Your business owners, if you volunteer, somebody's dependent on you to show up to do that. If you are employed, you got a boss dependent on you. So a lot of times we're serving so many different hats, and they're all different. So we are truly a house of plenty. And then I didn't even talk about, like, even the birds and the animals. Where does procreation come from? The female, right? The woman. So we have so much to offer. And the book talks about that from a standpoint of, once the queen bee is what it starts. And I think Tia, that's her favorite chapter. Because, in a beehive, there's only one queen bee. There's only one. And that's usually how it happens. There's only one. And when that one is getting ready to die, somebody takes over that matriarch, and they pick who they want to come in. And then there's thousands. And you think about the tigers. Anybody know about tigers? The woman in the tiger, the female does all the honey. Yeah. He shows up, and he goes ahead and makes sure he gets her pregnant and all of that, but he chills. She goes out. He's gone, then he's gone. When she's done with him or whatever happens, I tell my family, I said, it's so funny to tell you, they got deadbeat dads all the time. It's okay. That's what she's supposed to do. So it's a very interesting creation in God. So it talks about that. It talks about what is the definition of beauty. You have to figure that out. That's your personal brand. It's you figure it out. I think she said it perfect. She was putting pictures on social media. Everything's fine. That's what she wanted to do. That was her beautifying her family, her beautifying her situation, and her figuring it out. Not saying, hey, we're this. Can you send us this? Can you help us with this? No, she created her own beauty. And this is what the beautification of my life happening right now. Same thing I was doing with my mom. I didn't know how I was going to pay a bill. I didn't know how I was going to do anything. I was a caretaker of somebody that was dying, and I had no income. What did I do? I just smiled and said, we'll figure it out. I created the beauty in that situation for me. It's okay to do that. Establish your own standards, love and action. Don't be the gossiper, be the gossipee. You're no better than the next. The dinner rule, friend or foe. That was something we were always raised with, like the dinner rule, friend or foe. We meet so many acquaintances, and it was always one of those things. How do you know if somebody's your true friend? She talked about Baltimore and The Wire and all of that. No matter where you come from, there's really true friends you meet, and then there's some that don't, and they don't have to be the people in your own walls. They be some people all out. How do you know a friend or a foe? We have one rule, and it works till this day. And that is, whoever genuinely wants to be your friend or a true acquaintance, they usually will break bread with you. They usually will do that. They'll break bread some kind of way. If someone genuinely invites you into their home and asks you to have a meal with them, y'all might not be the best of friends, but there's some genuine interest that they have in you. And you think about it in yourselves. How many people have you come across and you say, I will never invite them nowhere near my house or near my... Think about it, right? Because you don't have that common... So when you're trying to figure that out, that's what friend or foe. It doesn't mean people are bad. It's not about bad people. Not everybody is good. Me and my aunt, we had to break up because she says, you find good in Jeffrey Dahmer. Because you do. Everybody has some good some way. That's somebody's child. But it doesn't mean that you have to be best of friends or you have to even be an acquaintance. That's something that helps you determine that. Breaking food together makes a big difference. So I want to give this to someone. The dinner rule, integrity is an invitation to peace. The love advantage of charity, celebrating you, and then the attitude. Thank you.
Our next guest is Nurjan Ahmedova. I hope I've pronounced her name correctly. She is a community coordinator at Katherine K. Hanley Family Shelter, one of 4 sister shelters under the Shelter House umbrella. They do great work. She is a highly motivated and goal-oriented professional with a successful professional track record in project management, community engagement, volunteer recruitment, and retention. Nurjan manages all aspects of KHFS volunteer and community outreach programs and education on issues of homelessness and domestic violence in Fairfax County. And now, Nurjan Ahmedova.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Nurjan Ahmedova. I'm a community coordinator at Katherine K. Hanley Family Shelter, one of 4 sister shelters under the Shelter House umbrella. And I have a colleague of mine, Tracey Huntley, here with us today. She was able to join us and will be talking about the DV side of the work that Shelter House does in the community. First of all, we'd like to thank Women of Good Works, Tia, Michelle, for the wonderful event and for the opportunity to share about Shelter House and the work that we do. As a community coordinator, my job mostly involves volunteer recruitment, retention management, community outreach and fundraising, but it takes a whole team of professionals like case managers, employment specialists, housing locators, residential coordinators, mental health professionals to provide the support services to the population that we serve. And we heavily rely on volunteers and pro bono services. We brought a variety of flyers at our little information session over there, and we would love to invite you to visit our shelters, visit our locations, learn about Shelter House and what we do. We have monthly information sessions at the Hanley location. That's where I'm stationed, in Fairfax. And we're also going to have a lot of events planned by our DV team, which Tracey is going to talk about in a second.
As Nurjan said, I'm Tracey Huntley. I'm the Resource and Operations Supervisor for the Domestic Violence Shelter for Shelter House. We recently expanded. There was Artemis House was located in North County of Fairfax County. We recently expanded to South County. So I'm the Resource and Operations Supervisor for South County. We went from 45 beds to about 90 beds. And we service anybody that's in Fairfax County that needs services for domestic violence, human trafficking, and sexual assault. And anybody that needs the services would call our hotline and go through a lethality assessment. And at that point, it would be determined if they were coming in the shelter or if they need referrals for anything else. But our program is a 45-day program with room for extension. And like you said, there's extensive case management, housing specialists, job specialists. I supervise the resource coordinators, so they take the phone calls for the ladies that are coming in. And we service men, women, anybody, LGBTQ, anybody that's experiencing any type of human trafficking, sexual assault, anything like that, we service them. We encourage anybody, even if you're in this DMV area and somebody's experiencing something, if they can get into Fairfax County, we will service them. In October is a Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So we're having a big event at the PJ Skidoos in Fairfax where all the proceeds and everything go directly to Artemis House, which is a domestic violence shelter. I have some flyers on the table over there. Like Nurjan said, we rely heavily on donors and pro bono work and volunteers. And because the shelter in South County just opened in February, so we are in need of staff. I'm still hiring for drivers and part-time residential workers, anybody that wants to work part-time on the weekends or volunteer their services with resume writing, helping the clients fill out applications, any free legal services like that. We're looking for all those things. That's about it. That's all I have.